Well, I have to admit, when I first saw today's gospel, and I thought, oh, Jesus, why didn't RJ get that one? It's over there. I can't see you, RJ, because you're being blocked by this pillar over here. But anyway, it's about washing kettles and washing your hands before you eat, and what makes somebody. It's this kind of very kind of Pharisaical kind of tradition that comes, and what Jesus says is what makes us clean or holy is primarily a matter of the heart. It's not whether we do these ritual cleansings, but it's from the heart. What's in our heart? And if Jesus says, if you want to know whether someone is holy or not, look at what comes from their heart. Look at their actions. And St. James says today in the second reading, be doers of the word and not hearers only. And also St. James says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God is this, to care for orphans and widows in their affliction. So it's not so much a matter of this ritual cleanliness, keeping all the rituals, but it's a matter of, what do we do, and are we caring for the poor? And Jesus says that from within people, from their hearts come evil, malice, deceit, envy, arrogance, and not so much the ritual cleanliness or uncleanness that defiles someone. So when I looked at this, I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to my old trusty, the 7 deadly sins. Those of you who have been around for a while know that I love the 7 deadly sins, and I was just thinking I should probably spend more time on the 12 fruits of the Holy Spirit than the 7 deadly sins, but I don't know, I'm kind of stuck on those 7 deadly sins. They really fascinate me. But I think that this really, this gospel talks about that. The monks, the 7 deadly sins go way back to the early monastic tradition, the desert fathers and mothers, way back in the 4th and 3rd centuries. And they basically observed that these were 7 basic temptations that human beings experience. They're universal. And the goal of the monks was purity of heart. And they realized that if they gave into these temptations, that would cloud over purity of the heart. And I think it is helpful to look at these basic temptations, just to recognize them, so that we can recognize them when they occur and know how to counteract them. And so when Jesus says it's what comes from the heart that makes us unclean, I think he could, and actually the list that he gives is close to the 7 deadly sins. It's those things that really, defile us if we give in to them. That's if we give in to them. And they are gluttony, lust, greed, sloth, envy, anger, and pride. So let me just give a little reflection on 5 of them. I thought I'd start with greed, which is a particularly American vice, and avarice, like gluttony and lust, are really sins of excess. The greedy person, to desire to have what we need for ourselves and our family, that's a good thing, to take care of ourselves, food and clothing, etc. That's a good thing, but when it becomes aberrant is when we take it to an extreme, and it's a drive then to possess more and more for no other reason than just to possess. So it becomes, rather than just getting what we need to take care of ourselves and our family, it becomes a drive just for more and more and more and more. Think of Ebenezer Scrooge in the Christmas Carol. He's a comical character, but he's a very sad character. He's not happy, but he always wants more, and he doesn't care about Tiny Tim and his family. He doesn't care about those people who work for him. He just wants more and more for himself. And that's kind of an image of greed. And greed is very selfish. It's always thinking, the greedy person's always thinking about themselves. The opposite of greed is generosity, the virtue by which we give rather than acquire. And also poverty of spirit, where we hold what we have lightly. Consumerism and the assumption that profits come before people are current manifestations of greed in our culture. So that's one thing to be aware of, is greed. And, and we can be greedy about other things maybe than just money or possessions. There's other things that we might seek or covet. The second one I wanted to comment on is envy. And I always kind of feel sad when people confess envy. Once in a while, that people do confess that. And I think envy is a sin against gratitude. There's always going to be somebody who's going to be smarter, richer, better looking, or has more than I do, unless you're Father RJ. But otherwise, you will. There's always going to be somebody who has more than you do. That's just a fact. And I remember our novice director used to tell us, gentlemen, compare and despair. So if you it's comparing yourself with other people never ends up in a good place. Never. You either are going to feel inferior or superior, either of which is not a good place. The grass is always greener on the other side of the hill. So rather than compare what I have with what you have, rather than compare my qualities or what I have with someone else's, it's much more helpful to value what I have, to value my gifts and even my limitations, and be grateful. I think all of us have plenty of reason to be grateful. All of us have been greatly blessed. All of us have been greatly gifted. And we just celebrated the life of a wonderful young man, Philip Paulus, and just a very tragic death at 21. We celebrated his funeral yesterday. But he was a young man who just enjoyed life and wanted other people to be happy and was always interested in others. And that is what we're called to. And also we're called to rejoice in other people's goods. And sometimes that can be difficult when a friend or a family member, maybe a sibling, experiences some success, that we might feel jealous or envious. But rather we should rejoice in what they experience. And the key to that is, once again, is to be grateful for what we have. I would also say that envy is a sin of pride, because if you think about it, if I'm always comparing myself with other people, what's the reference point? Me, 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 me. It's all about me. And the opposite of envy is humility and gratitude. And a word about lust. Lust is one of the most commonly confessed sins, especially for males young and old. Feeling attracted to others is normal and healthy. Life would be dull without it. It's part of God's plan. It leads to the creation of families. It's also a powerful force that can get us into trouble, as we see in our society. And the key is not to objectify people or use people for our own gratification, and also to respect boundaries. And it's very important for all of us to respect boundaries. And a lot of trouble happens when we're not respecting boundaries. And the opposite of lust is self-giving love. And then anger. Anger is one of the other two most commonly confessed sins, and by both men and women, I would add. Men don't have a corner on the anger market. Once again, anger is a normal feeling. When we feel hurt, we're gonna feel angry. That's just a natural human response. And anger can be healthy if it leads us to protect ourselves and to protect those we care about. We see Jesus getting angry in the Gospels when he sees his Father's house being defiled, and he's like, "How dare you defile my Father's house?" So even he expressed anger. So feeling anger in itself is not a sin. It's only sinful when it leads us to hurt others. But it's healthy when it leads us to reach out and reconcile with others. I find sometimes if my feelings are hurt and I get angry and I just pray with it for a while, sometimes I just let it go, and sometimes I will say to myself, I need to talk to that person and really reconcile. And that can actually then lead me to come closer to that person. It can lead to healing. We can get angry with God. When some tragedy happens, And God, we can be angry with God, but in expressing our anger with God actually can lead us to coming closer to God, because God can hear us and help us achieve healing. So the opposite of anger is love and concern and forgiveness. And the last one is pride. And pride is the root of them all. I think it's summarized in "it's all about me," and I'm the center of the universe. I think all of us can maybe be tempted to think that way sometimes. But think anytime you feel aggrieved in any way, I think you might notice that at the bottom of that is me. How I was not given proper recognition, or I wasn't given proper this or proper that. It's all about me. So if I'm feeling upset, it's often a sign that something's wrong with me. There's something disordered within me. And the opposite of pride is humility. And humility is to understand that we're not self-sufficient. We are not self-sufficient. That we depend on other people. And again, that I'm not the center of the universe. And St. Ignatius, well, actually it was more Father Pedro Rupe, talked about being a person for others. So the opposite of pride is to be humble, to realize that I'm not self-sufficient, to realize I'm not the center of the universe, to realize it's not all about me, and to try to be a person for others. And the most wonderful offspring of humility is gratitude, to be grateful. Again, a lot of this comes down to gratitude. And the key is to move from I to we. So if we want to be holy, if we want to be pure of heart, I think it behooves ourselves once in a while to reflect on these 7 deadly sins, and to recognize these temptations within us, and to know that if we see those temptations within us, it doesn't make us bad people. It just makes us human. It's just that we're human. If we experience those feelings, it just shows that we're human. So we'll recognize them, but we don't have to give in to them, and that's the key. In Ignatian spirituality and discernment of spirits, oftentimes when we feel something, we can ask ourselves, is that from the good spirit or is that from the evil spirit? Well, my brothers, if it's one of the 7 deadly sins, there's a good chance it's from the evil spirit. Just a little tip there for discernment. I don't want to take your thunder, Sister Catherine, but that's a pretty clear sign. So to realize if it's coming from one of those places, a place of envy, greed, lust, anger, it's probably not from the good spirit. And so we need to just surrender it and ask for God's help. And God can help us to overcome these temptations. All of us are imperfect, all of us are human, and we need God's help. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.